Hello and welcome to our 2024 Outlook Louisiana, broadcast by NOLA.com. Today's discussion here is going to be presented by Entergy and New Orleans and Company. It is a chance for us to really dive into the economic forecast with some well-respected, some well-known, and very knowledgeable business leaders in Southeast Louisiana. So I want to get right to the introductions. I am Kim Holden, but we are going to start with Eddie Kennison, retired NFL player, also now with Louisiana Sports Properties. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. I appreciate it. Yes, my name is Eddie Kennison III. I am a retired NFL player. I played 13 seasons in the National Football League and with the St. Louis Rams, New Orleans Saints, Chicago Bears, Denver Broncos, and Kansas City Chiefs. I've been back in Louisiana 3 years now working with LSU Sports Properties. We do direct marketing and advertising within our stadiums on LSU's campus. And we are here to help with all corporate and corporate sponsorships and partnerships.
All right. And next up, we have Steve Morgan with Hancock Whitney. Welcome.
Thank you. As you said, Steve Morgan, investment director with Hancock Whitney's Asset Management Group. Hancock Whitney is a well-known name of the formation of two storied names across the Gulf South and operations with retail, business, commercial banking throughout New Orleans and across the state. In particular, asset management works within our wealth group, looking at national, global, and regional and local trends to help guide our investors, which are both individuals, families, as well as institutions, in order to make decisions about investment portfolios and then put that in the context of their greater financial picture.
All right. Thank you, Steve. And then we have Philip May with Entergy.
Thank you, Kim. I'm Philip May with Entergy. I'm president and CEO. Been in this industry nearly 38 years, and it's a really exciting time. I think everyone knows that Entergy is your local power provider, but we also do quite a bit to improve the economic outcomes of the state. And right now, we're seeing, in my 38 years, one of the largest and best industrial development pipelines I've ever seen. And so it's a huge opportunity for the state of Louisiana. I'm excited to talk more about it today.
All right. Walt Leger with New Orleans and Company is also joining us today.
Good morning. I'm Walt Leger. I'm the president and CEO of New Orleans and Company. And it's my honor to work with an incredible team that works every day to attract, inspire, promote, and encourage people to visit our city for the benefit of the community at large. And so we bring millions of people to the city of New Orleans, to the region, and to the state each and every year from across the country and across the globe. We try to encourage them to come for leisure, to come for special events like the Sugar Bowl or for the Super Bowl that we'll host in 2025. But mostly our team works day in and day out trying to sell conferences, meetings, and conventions, which really serves as the foundation of the tourism economy for both the city and for the state. And we're operating currently in a really complex environment, one that has serious competition all over the country, where there are major investments being made in hotel properties and convention center properties, and where there are also more questions than ever asked by meeting planners about why your city should be the one that they choose for their events. So it's a real honor to advocate for our city, for our region, and for our state globally each and every day. And I know that our team takes incredible pride when we're able to compete and win for the people of our community.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, guys. We have some pointed questions for the panel here. And in the spirit of discussion, feel free to jump in on any of the questions, but we will kind of go down the line and ask pointed questions to each of you. And I'm going to start with Walt because you do talk about this being one of the most complex selling environments in terms of, your sales team. What exactly does that mean? Just dive a little bit more into that.
Yeah, sure. Our sales team is deployed geographically and also by subject matter, and we work with major organizations, corporate organizations, but a lot of associations. You hear about the big medical conferences, you hear about the big academic conferences that we try to bring in, and so as we continue to emerge from the pandemic, when meetings were not happening, meeting planners are under more pressure than ever to deliver on those events. These meetings and conferences are often the majority of the revenue that these associations generate in any given year. So there's incredible pressure to have an excellent event that's well produced, but more importantly, well attended. And so the questions, though, that arise in that sales process now, I think, are more complicated than ever. Our team is being asked to be experts in things that they've never been asked about before. So, for example, it used to be, does New Orleans have a nice convention center? Is it big enough, and can it, host 20,000 hematologists? Does the food service, is it adequate? Is it good? Will our attendees enjoy it? Are the hotels adequate? Do we have enough hotel space to accommodate it? Now what people are asking is all of those questions, but also tell me about sustainability in your community. What sort of resiliency is being built into the infrastructure to be able to contribute to reducing our footprint? We know that when we travel by air or otherwise that we're having an impact. Help me to understand how you can offset that in your community. Wait a second, tell me about the political climate in your city and your state. We have people who are concerned about some of the legislation that we see coming out of Louisiana these days. Help me understand how I should bring 20,000 physicians to your city when we have real concerns about some of the things that we're seeing happening there. Or we have many members who are members of the LGBTQ plus community, and we're not happy with what we're seeing with legislation or other decisions being made. Our team is being asked to sort of be partners with these groups in figuring out ways that they can still choose to come to our city and to our state, and how they can also effectively engage in the community to have their voices heard. And so I know that all of those things are a part of the conversation, along with other planning needs that go along with major meetings, conferences, and events. So we're not only selling a meeting once, we're selling it again and again and again because things continue to change on the ground. And we book these meetings sometimes 10 years in advance. So we're currently booking meetings into 2030, 2031, 2032. It's uncertain what things will look like in those years. And so as the meetings continue to approach, the questions continue to emerge. And that among many other things makes it a really complex environment where you really have to be on top of it with your customers day in and day out.
And your sales force basically too. I mean, you really have to do some extra training, I guess.
A lot of training, a lot of hand-holding. And honestly, it's really, I think, a wonderful opportunity to celebrate some great things happening in our community. There used to be questions asked about August and September meetings because of the risk of hurricane weather in New Orleans and the idea that everyone knew that that was something that was at risk. But we now get to tell the story of $14 billion of hurricane protection that's been built to protect our city. And with Hurricane Ida just a couple of years ago, we were able to very quickly get back up and running. And we hosted a conference at the convention center within 7 days. And so we're proud to be able to talk about that infrastructure investment, the investment that the federal government's made to protect our community, and to be able to show real-life examples of how that innovation is put to use in battling climate change and sea level rise and some of the other things happening. So I think it's a source of pride for us, but it's also another thing that our team does have to be focused on learning about and talking about, and that's just not ever been the case in the history of this type of sales environment. And I know other cities are facing it too. But we want to win, and so we go out and our team works really hard to bring home victories for the city.
All right, thank you, Walt. Philip, given the current market trends, we're going to talk a little bit more about different industry. How do you foresee the future of Louisiana's industries like oil and gas, shipping, all of that evolving over the next decade?
Yeah, so I think for our traditional industries in Louisiana, the heavy energy intensive type industries, the outlook is extremely bright. What we're seeing is Louisiana is very competitive because we have, and you might not know it from driving on our streets, but we actually have world-class infrastructure in terms of connected pipelines for feedstock and offtake, deep water ports and waterways that support commerce. And a lot of this stuff is focusing on export to the international markets and so forth. So Louisiana has become extremely important in that. To demonstrate how big this is, the LSU Center for Energy Studies 2024 Gulf Coast Energy Outlook looked at since 2013, there's been $262 billion of energy-intensive announcements along the Gulf Coast. More than 50%, 144 billion of that is in Louisiana. So it really goes to how well Louisiana is positioned to take advantage of some changes that we're seeing. Now, we talked about the sort of the normal kind of competitive advantages we have, the low energy prices, that incredible infrastructure that we have that supports energy-intensive industries. But, what we're also seeing is some shifts around that, because much like what you were talking about, Walt, with people are asking questions about resiliencies and sustainability and so forth. So what we're seeing is Louisiana's new competitive advantages, along with things we traditionally have, is we also have the ability to offer sustainability and resiliency. So two ways that can happen. One is we're seeing development of solar energy as a way to provide clean energy sources for these companies. Some of these companies may be producing products, but they have commitments to their customers that they're reducing their carbon footprint. And the way they can do that is to reduce the carbon impact of the energy used. So we're making solar energy, for instance, available to them. We already have one of the cleanest portfolios in the country, and with the addition of solar energy, we can make zero carbon energy available, so the products they produce are lower carbon. And that's not being driven from a policy perspective, say by the current administration. They're really being driven by their customers and by the marketplace. So in order to be competitive, Louisiana has to make these offerings. The other point I'll make out is resiliency is another important part of that. We need a stronger, more reliable grid. We are facing increasing threats from stronger, more frequent, intense hurricanes and other climate events. And so with that, we need a grid that is responsive to that. So we have proposed a program to strengthen our grid, a resilience program that's being considered by the City Council and the Louisiana Public Service Commission. But that's an important part of that, because these multi-billion-dollar projects, the folks who are going to lend the money for it have to have confidence that they have a strong infrastructure that can support those industries. And so that's a part of it. The last thing I'll mention on this, what we've seen on a global scale in terms of upheaval in global markets and so forth, what's happened in Europe has improved Louisiana's competitive position in terms of the low energy cost as compared to Europe and so forth. So these are structural changes that are happening that have improved the chances of those industries coming to the Gulf Coast, particularly Louisiana, and being very competitive. And those things include the traditional products we produce, plastics and so forth, but increasingly around energy transition, clean energy products, blue hydrogen, blue ammonia, green ammonia, sustainable aviation fuel, green diesel. Those kinds of things are increasingly part of the portfolio that we're manufacturing right here in Louisiana. In order to keep this going, there's a lot of things we have to do, including the resilience we talked about, sustainability. We also need to focus on workforce development. We have a strong workforce that's comfortable with this kind of industry. We have to make sure that our colleges and our technical colleges step up to help ensure we have a workforce that's ready for that wave of industry that's coming.
All right. Speaking of college, let's get back to Eddie over here with the year that LSU had in 2023 as a championship team in many sports. How does this create an economic lift, not just for the university, but also for the whole state of Louisiana?
Well, we, as athletes, we get pretty excited about championships. And when you have a university that has multiple championships in different sports, you get to go out and you get to recruit the kids not only in the state of Louisiana, but you get to go out of state as well, but particularly in the state of Louisiana. And you get to bring those athletes in and let them see what a championship university looks like, not just on the field or on the court, but also in the classroom. And with our athletic director and our new president, Dr. Tate, they've been very intentional about the athletic or the academic side of things, and then athletics. And as a athlete, when you come into a program, you want to be able to be coached and led by men and women who are there, who are coaching, where I can learn from and I can become a young adult within that time frame. And as parents, when parents lend their kids to the university, they want to know that their kids are being taught and led in a manner by the coaches at a championship mindset in the classroom and on the field or the court.
I love that you say parents lend their kids to the university. That is so true. And academics, then athletics. Thank you, Eddie.
You're welcome.
Steve, how do you see consumer demand really driving some of these tourism patterns into 2024?
Absolutely. I think that one of the things that we're seeing is, as we look into 2024, a little bit of shift in consumer demand. There are a number of sort of funding sources that are drying up, a little bit less growth in terms of real wages, although that's been fairly robust of late. So as we look into 2024, and I want to emphasize again that this is from my perspective as managing investment portfolios and not necessarily the bank strategy, but overall, New Orleans seems, and South Louisiana across the board, seems especially well positioned. I'll note, actually, just in the last couple of days, The Economist, an international magazine, featured Louisiana culture as one of its highlights in a daily podcast. But as we see that consumer demand sort of shift, preferences shift, and consumers are really looking for an easier, maybe less expensive outlet for some of their travel, remember that we are within an easy day's drive or travel from major metropolitan centers like Houston, Dallas, Tampa, Miami, Atlanta, Nashville, et cetera. So a lot of what I think that we'll see in the next several years is consumers looking to not necessarily take the more exotic trips, the more expensive trips, but look to New Orleans and South Louisiana as a real center for authentic culture that can give both the family and individuals an experience that they will relish for a lifetime, and be able to do that in a way that fits into their overall consumer patterns. So I think overall that's a promising outlook for what we're seeing at the individual as opposed to the meeting level.
Okay, and that's a perfect segue back to Walt. Just talking about coming off what appeared to be a really successful Sugar Bowl in the city, and it usually is. But how do you see the role of cultural events, major sporting events, festivals, attractions like that in the tourism industry, and what impact will that have on the future numbers and also the hotel occupancy rates in the city?
Yeah, so I think they're critically important. So I couldn't agree more with your comments. I think we're seeing from a projection standpoint that each year gets stronger and stronger starting in 24, going into 25, 26, 27, and 28. We're all well above our pace on bookings as it relates to 17 to 19, which were really high points in the industry. These cultural events, these sporting events, these major events that happen are absolutely critical. I spoke a little bit about the meetings industry, the convention industry, kind of being the foundation of the visitor economy for the New Orleans area. It's important, I think, to kind of get some context there. And in 2019, we had about 20 million visitors that came to the city. Only about 4.5 million of them were here for conferences or meetings. So a small number in comparison to those that are here for leisure or for sporting events or other sort of festivals and cultural attractions. But they spent about $5 billion of the $10 billion spent for those conferences and meetings. So they're really critical because they touch 15, 20 different small businesses when they're in town. They're like startups. They come into town, they go either to a hotel where they have an in-hotel meeting, or they go into the convention center where they have a convention citywide meeting. They have to hire audiovisual technicians. They have to have caterers. They have to have transportation. They have to have all of these other businesses throughout our community that service those events for a limited period of time. They also create sort of the compression and the pressure in the industry that allows for leisure to come in and then for our businesses to generate revenue off of that visitation, especially in our hotels. I mean, desirability drives rates. Mm-hmm. It's why, for example, just last week when we had this Sugar Bowl, Forbes magazine, Forbes.com reported that New Orleans was the most expensive place in the world for New Year's Eve this year.
I saw that.
And you can take that one way. Obviously, we don't want to be seen as the most expensive. However, I think we were the most desirable place in the world to be at for New Year's Eve this year. And that's something to be celebrated. You saw that in the hotel rates. You saw that in the fact that restaurants were packed. You saw that with visitors, mostly from Washington and Texas, obviously, being here to really support our economy and get us off to a good start. So as we continue to go, we've got to protect things like the Sugar Bowl, make sure that those games are meaningful, right? It was a playoff game. It mattered. In the future, the next 2 years, there will be quarterfinal games, which will be impactful for the playoff system. But beyond that, the competition is real, right? Nashville is putting up $75 million to attract things like Super Bowls, Final Fours, college football playoffs. Las Vegas has unlimited funding. They print money, and they do whatever they want with it. Cities in Texas, Austin, San Antonio, Houston, Dallas are all putting up substantial resources to be able to compete to bring these games and events to their city, to their cities. And so we've got to be prepared to compete as well. That's going to be a challenge for us as we go forward. We have a major events fund at the state level that helps us to attract and win these events. That's going to have to become even more robust as time goes on. And we'll have to continue to support and grow the other cultural attractions, things like Jazz Fest and French Quarter Fest, other emerging events like the Fried Chicken Festival, which has become more and more popular as time goes on. It certainly bodes well for us, what we're seeing, but we also are hopeful that we'll continue to be able to paint a broad picture of what the city of New Orleans is, what it has to offer. We know that the French Quarter has this reputation for celebration and for partying, and people think of the French Quarter and they think of Bourbon Street. ESPN didn't do us a whole lot of favors. It just sort of reinforced a feeling that people have. What doesn't often get talked about enough, and we try to push this out as much as we can, is that there are 9 world-class museums in the French Quarter that are really incredible. If we can just begin to shift some of our visitors' focus even slightly to spending more time in some of those institutions like the Historic New Orleans Collection, the Cabildo, the State Museum, and on and on and on. I think that will be a really positive impact for our whole community in a lot of different ways. Culturally, I think it strengthens us, but also economically, it strengthens us based on the type of visitor who spends time in our city.
Okay.
And Kim, if I can add to
Absolutely.
that, if you don't mind. We do have a lieutenant governor who advocates tremendously for the state of Louisiana. Yes. We see him traveling all over the place. He was just in the New Year's Day Rose Bowl parade. He does a number of parades where he promotes travel to Louisiana. And for a guy who travels a lot, I hear people talking all the time, man, either I've been to Louisiana and I want to go back, or going to a sporting event. This year, we played Florida State in Orlando, and Florida State fans, they were like, man, we want to have this back in New Orleans. So you think of like visit New Orleans, visit Baton Rouge, visit Lake Charles. All of those visit places are doing a tremendous job with bringing tourism into Louisiana, and the numbers are absolutely showing it.
Thank you, Eddie. And Philip, what is Entergy doing to boost economic development in the state, specifically for larger industrial companies?
Yeah, so, at a high level, we're very keenly interested in economic development. More than any other industry, our success is tied to the success of the communities we serve. Mm-hmm. So when we're thinking about economic development, we think about it comprehensive. It's not just about the companies that you can attract and get to come to Louisiana, but it has to start with education and how we pull our communities up. So, for instance, we're a big advocate of early childhood education. We think that is a key success in terms of people being able to progress through school and so forth. We're also make sure that we have quality teachers and quality schools. That should be available to everyone, regardless of what their zip code is. And we also are focused on our technical schools, our universities, and so forth. Louisiana has enormous opportunities for folks, whether they go to school or they work in the trade, because of these industries we have. So making sure that our technical schools are preparing our students, our children, for the jobs that are coming. So that's a big part of that. But on top of that is really understanding what are those critical competitive advantages that Louisiana has, and making sure that we can attract industries that are focused in those areas. On top of that, those industries that we talked about this a bit, is we have to have a resilient grid. They need to know that when they invest money here, they will be able to get their plants back up and running soon after an event. But that also goes for their workers. And so, for instance, when we have a hurricane, we need to get those plants back up online, but there's hundreds of workers at each of those plants. We need to get the neighborhoods back online so those folks can come back to work. What's important about that is a significant portion of Louisiana's workforce are hourly workforce. So if you think about this, if you have to evacuate from a hurricane, when that happened in Harvey and Houston several years ago, the average cost for a family to evacuate is $1,200. That's an enormous financial strain. If we can avoid that, that's a financial help for those families. More importantly, if we can get our communities back online in days instead of weeks after a major hurricane, you also avoid the lost wages, because with many of these being hourly work, if those businesses, if those hotels, if those restaurants are not up and running, they're not getting paid. So that's an important part of it. But the other part for regard to heavy industry, it's a resilient grid. We have a proposal that's being considered by the Public Service Commission and the City Council to improve that grid, to make it more resilient so we can get it back online in days instead of weeks. And the second part of that is really about making sure we can have a sustainable industry. And to do that, we are growing our solar portfolio. Right now, we only have about 50 megawatts that are online, but we have over 5,000 megawatts that are in development. And a lot of that is tailored so that those folks that are interested in growing their business in a clean and sustainable way have access to those products so that we can attract investment to Louisiana. And that's critically important. The last thing I will mention is a key competitive advantage that Louisiana is now emerging with is the ability, because of our geologic structures, to capture and sequester carbon. So carbon capture and sequestration is going to be a huge opportunity for Louisiana. And if you think about what are some of the most successful places in the U.S. right now, it really is about innovation centers and what they're creating and what is that critical mass of thinking they have there. I think Louisiana has a real opportunity around becoming an innovation center around energy transition, around sequestering carbon, and it's a real opportunity about how we grow our state. My daughters are soon to be 17 years old. They're looking at colleges outside of state. I want to have an economy that allows them to come back and have successful jobs right here in Louisiana. We can do that by focusing on the opportunity that's before us.
I'd like to pop in on that as well, because I think New Orleans and Louisiana, South Louisiana in general, are, as Phil mentioned, very well prepared for the evolution of energy as we move forward. So there are major global trends that are really driving what I'll call a polarization between the U.S., allies, et cetera, and some of the other parts of the world where China and Russia are trying to form their own industrial bases. And that's really emphasized and rewriting supply chain questions. So LNG, oil and gas as drivers of current growth are, I think, very important. We're seeing, in fact, just last year, 2022, well, year before, in the sort of aftermath of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, an increase not only in a fairly large increase in exports from Louisiana internationally, but especially oil and gas products as an export as well as an import through the port. So that's an important driver of what we see. As we also move through that sort of supply chain resiliency, I think there's a couple of other key issues. Rare earth metals, which have been traditionally supplied from Asia, are now being tried to resource both domestically and in other places like South America and Africa. New Orleans as a natural port of entry and major area to get those materials up through the various industrial centers of the country is well positioned to both act as a major import and energy transformation hub, but also to develop those industries ourselves, so that advanced manufacturing, which has been one of the kind of key drivers of South Louisiana's economic growth, should continue. And that's a multi-decade opportunity for us. So short-term LNG, oil and gas, as we move forward, those sorts of transformation activities, I think, are going to be key.
I think Walt needs to
And,
chime in on this.
I just wanted to add, there are so many conversations like this one around what do we need to do to secure our economic future. And I just wanted to highlight and, agree with and thank Philip for his comments about early childhood education, about investing in our community technical colleges and our universities. The truth is the future of economic growth are in those two areas. There often are conversations around incentives and other things that have to happen in order for us to be a successful state and to grow our economy. And the truth is sometimes it's really that simple. It's being very focused on ensuring that our youngest children get the greatest opportunities to develop their brains and to be ready to learn when they get into school, and for our political leaders to make investments in our community technical colleges and in our universities so that they can churn out students who can prosper in our state in the jobs that are being created here. So I think so important to just realize that some of this stuff isn't as complicated as it may sound. It really is sort of the basics and setting the foundation the right way. And I think it's so important that leaders like Philip are able to speak to that and continue to have that heard throughout the community and throughout the state.
And one of the things we haven't talked about, and Steve, this will go to you next, is the Louisiana residential and commercial real estate market. And, the bottom line is not only getting our kids back, but getting people to stay here once they are here. So, Steve, what do you think are the key factors in driving the trends in the real estate market, both residential and commercial, and how do those relate to broader economic growth?
Sure. So I think obviously we've seen the Fed embark on sort of a shock and awe program of raising rates, mortgages have jumped, other commercial financing costs have increased significantly. That's probably ending near sort of the end of that stage, and some loosening that's coming forth that will make that a little bit easier in terms of that development and really making choices around what are the best uses of commercial development and what are those industries that we really want to look for. So I think that's going to be a key driver, and obviously the utilities network, as we've seen, is going to be an important part of whether we can support those advanced manufacturing jobs. In terms of residential especially, but also a driver of that advanced technology is, as we touched on, the livability concerns around the state, particularly in the New Orleans and other kind of along the river areas where we're looking to see some of that, and along the coast where we're looking to see some of those growth areas. It's obviously important that we make sure that our current residents are getting the best education possible. But in order to attract the next generation, the sort of next generation of manufacturing, we need to have the right infrastructure to pull in workers that may bring expertise that we do not yet have locally. And that means making sure that we're dealing with crime, making sure that education levels in early childhood and beyond are at places that somebody that is looking from someplace else in the country, starting a family, can really drive and look forward to and say, this is an area that actually does offer something that I can take my children to and feel comfortable with. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be the most helpful driver. We've seen large trends of movement from sort of the north into the southern states. Louisiana has not yet participated as much in that as places like Texas and Florida, obviously. So we do need to make sure that we're addressing some of the cost of residential housing, but maybe more importantly, particularly from an economic driver standpoint, looking at what are the social support networks, mm-hmm. what are the education, crime, cultural activities that are going to drive people that are making choices about their future careers to come here.
Okay, very good. The next question I want all of you to answer at some point here. How does your organization support and promote minority communities and minority-owned businesses? Eddie, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, one thing we've done at LSU Athletics is promote diverse supplier spending. It's a program where we track and measure how much of the budget that we have goes to locally minority-owned businesses. That could be having them cater meetings or big events, or having signage done for stadium partners within our local community. It's all about our intentionality. You know, our president and our athletic director, they're very intentional about getting these local minority-owned businesses on campus to be able to have them do business with LSU. And it's been, I've been back at LSU for almost 3 years, and I hear this conversation every year in our meetings to make sure that we're intentional about finding locally owned minority businesses to do business with LSU.
Are there barriers that come up?
There's some barriers. There's some state and local barriers that happen at the businesses. Doesn't matter if they are a minority business or any business. There are things that they have to tap into and have to have things to be able to do business with LSU. Like I'll think of one like insurance policies. That's one big thing that to cover and make sure that LSU and the minority business or any business is covered in the right manner.
Okay, Steve?
Sure, and this is a tremendously important topic. Recent report from the Economic Data Center of Greater New Orleans pointed out that small business formation was a key driver of employment. In fact, offset some wage job loss for us. So it's something that we need to look at, and especially given the population that naturally leads us to also emphasize minority and women-owned businesses, et cetera. There are some hurdles. I already mentioned that financing costs have gone up, so business formation in general is more difficult. But I think there are two emerging trends that are related and that we are involved with. Education and training for the first, and then partnerships to really make sure that we are covering the waterfront and getting into the right places at the same time. So, for example, we've run a capitalized conference that helps small businesses work to understand what are the sources of funding that they may have as they form their business. And more importantly, it's not just formation, it's continue to prosper. So it's how do we fund that next warehouse? How do we fund the next project that we're looking at? And that's tied very closely to the partnership theme that I mentioned, both public and private. We have a partnership with the city of New Orleans around particularly supplier diversity and training for that. We work with the Small Business Development Center in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, elsewhere, really looking at how do we help you put together a business plan? How does that look in terms of what are the next steps? What are the expertise that you need to bring in so that you can have the insurance, have the accounting, have all the things that you need to participate, and not just private, public, but also private. We have a partnership just announced in the fall with Energy that we'll be working together, particularly on resiliency and growth of local and diverse businesses that really are going to concentrate primarily, I think, in that supplier area, but education obviously goes along with that. So it's a very critical piece for us. As a bank, we're tied to the local economy in important ways. And so we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to fully unleash some of that economic potential that may have not been accessed before.
But you've seen some pretty good success stories.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
No, I'll stay on the theme of partnerships. I think that's an important part of that. Now, those partnerships extend to educational institutions and so forth. There really is going out, and I'll tell you, the state of Louisiana has been really good in reacting and responding to what industry needs. So if you can go out and tell them, we need to prepare people to do these kinds of things, our technical schools, our universities are quick to adapt and to put together programs to help us do that. That is an important part because you can't just say, hey, we want more minority business. You have to have a supply chain. You have to have a pipeline. That means in creating the educational opportunities and helping with these businesses. The partnership we have with you all is an important part of helping to create and grow these businesses. The other part, for Louisiana, Entergy Louisiana, we have about $1 billion of O&M and about $2.5 billion a year of capital spend. That's an enormous opportunity for local businesses. And not all of those will go to local business because there are some are going to be expertise and so forth. But when we focus on diverse and local businesses, that means that we get double the impact of that. So if we spend $1 outside the state, well, certainly it's new infrastructure, or it's something fixed in our economy and so forth. But if we spend that dollar with a local and diverse supplier, that comes back to us. It helps grow the community. And as we said earlier, more than almost any other business and banking might be aside, we survive and we succeed as our community succeeds. So it's a key part of how we grow our business is by growing the businesses that count on us as well.
Yeah, so I think one of the big challenges continues to be lack of access to capital. And that is a challenge for all businesses, but particularly for minority and emerging businesses. And so while we can't be a part of necessarily supplying that capital, we do think that through partnerships and through intentionality, we can help our members because we are a member organization of 1,100 members to find access to capital and to find the resources they need to be able to take their business to the next level. When we are effectively able to bring in $10 billion of spending to the community, and our job, I think, is to then figure out the best possible way to spread that around as broadly as we can across neighborhoods, across businesses. Fortunately, I think our team has done a really good job. We've developed a couple of different programs, a procurement council that takes some of our major employers and major businesses in the community that are spending a lot and procuring a lot, like in partnership with the convention center, partnership with the hotel community, in partnership with our restaurant community, ensuring that small and minority-owned businesses are able to connect to those opportunities. We've found that oftentimes those businesses want to engage with local and minority-owned businesses. It's a matter of finding that connection. And so through partnerships that we've been able to forge with the Regional Black Chamber of Commerce and with the Louisiana Chamber of Commerce Foundation, which is a statewide African-American Chamber of Commerce, we've been able to give and provide memberships to some of their members, bring them into the fold, create networking opportunities for them to meet other members within New Orleans and Company, and then create those connections that make things happen. We have some great success stories. Box of Care is a local minority-owned business that designs unique boxes filled with locally made products that they have provided to the NCAA for the Final Four, that they're working on providing to the Super Bowl. These are really unique New Orleans and Louisiana boxes. And what's great about this business is they go seek out other products that are made by local minority-owned businesses. So you're getting double bang for your buck with that. It comes back to intentionality and really focusing on trying to make sure that you're developing and spreading the opportunity for people to succeed. And so there continue to be great challenges, but I think there's progress being made and educational programming that's moving us along.
And I think it all comes back to the different sectors working together and just listening to all four of you. That's what's happening, and that's what it sounds like here. Philip, how might potential regulatory changes, back to the industrial part of this, actually affect the heavy industry sector in Louisiana, both on a state and federal level?
Yeah, so, from a regulatory standpoint, certainly for us, it's the Louisiana Public Service Commission and the City Council for Entergy New Orleans. But I think the big part of that is things are changing quickly. And for instance, development of solar is something that the normal process for developing a new site takes years to do in terms of getting through the approval, going through an RFP, all of those kinds of things. I think one of the things we need to do, we need to be much more responsive. We need to move at the speed of business and at the level of both the City Council and the Public Service Commission. And we're doing things, and they're being responsive to that. But I think the big part of that is to be responsive to the opportunities we have. We're going to have to make investments in our grid to enable a lot of this growth. The opportunities are enormous. And so working and partnering with our Public Service Commission and our City Council to enable those things are going to be critically important. Those are elected offices, whether you're in the City Council or at the Public Service Commission. And what I find is any elected official, every one of them is pro-economic development. And these are all about growing our state, bringing jobs to our citizens and so forth. So the outcomes, we're all aligned on what we're trying to achieve.
Okay.
I'll throw in at a federal level a potential change. The Supreme Court this term is hearing a couple of cases that are related to important questions around the scope of executive regulatory authority and exactly what administrative bureaus can do. And so there may be, as we move into the summer, some changes in those rules that could potentially streamline from the federal level some of the regulatory hurdles, but that obviously means shifts that we'll also have to deal with the uncertainty.
Okay, and back to Walt, and you mentioned a little bit earlier about visitors come to the city, but most people think they just come to the city because it's an iconic city, and that's not necessarily going to be the case moving forward. There's a lot of competition out there. So can you talk about the emerging trends in Louisiana tourism that could significantly impact and shape the industry in the next, say, 5 years or so?
Yeah, well, I think that, Eddie kind of referenced this. People do love Louisiana and love New Orleans, and there's nothing more rewarding than being able to travel around, selling our city and our state, and having people respond to that. So we certainly are, we're people that are very proud of our community. I think we love welcoming people in and making them feel welcome when they're here with us and sharing our culture with them. I think that the competition, though, and the way that it continues to emerge, it requires us to be really smart and to pay attention to what's out there and what's happening. And I think there are some great opportunities for us if we can capitalize on it, but it takes a little nuance. It takes getting outside of of just selling the culture and trying to help people understand that you can have an excellent corporate meeting in our community because we have people who deliver that excellent experience, and you can add value to it with the incredible culture that our community has. For example, we have companies that are popping up all over the country that have no headquarters. For decades, states and cities have said, we want to attract the headquarters of major businesses to our community because of the job creation that comes along with it. Well, what if these businesses don't have a headquarters because people work remotely? They still have a need to have a culture. They still have a need to come together. Why should they not come together in New Orleans quarterly? Why should a business not come to a city like New Orleans, have an excellent quarterly meeting, add to that incredible meals, incredible music, incredible culture, and all the other things that you need to sort of build that corporate structure, but to do it quarterly? We have a great airport. We have great connectivity across the country. And I think we are, truly a remarkable and unique city that offers something that so many places that don't, and that is creativity everywhere you turn. And what better for business growth and innovation than a place that's a center of creativity? So that's an example. If we can find the ability, and certainly our team's working on this, to really tap into, you can have an excellent meeting in New Orleans that will be fundamentally sound and will allow you to get all of your work done. And to that, you can add incredible value with the culture and the people and all of the things that our community offers. I think that's a big opportunity for our city, but also for our state to kind of be a part of an emerging trend. And the second is sort of this whole they're calling it bleisure travel, business and leisure that's blended together. And I think we can benefit from that as much as anyone, which is you come here for your conference or convention and you stay for a few days with your family to be able to go to the Audubon Institute, the World War II Museum, and City Park, Children's Museum, all the other great family attractions that we have. And so, I think great opportunity for a place like Louisiana where the quality of life stuff is really good. There are challenges, and so we need our partners at the state and regionally to commit to resources that are necessary to help us deal with that. Public safety, homelessness, some of the other things that are challenges that cities and states all over the country are dealing with. We got to come together to solve those. But there is a certain quality of life that our city and state has that gives us a competitive advantage. We have to capitalize on it, and we have to tell the story of the unique things that maybe haven't always been celebrated in our community and that are excellent.
Okay, and you said a few things that just kind of triggered in my mind. You talked about connectivity. You talked about workers remote, doing a lot of remote work, digital innovation, and all of that plays a factor. How is the tech sector, we haven't talked a lot about the tech sector yet in Louisiana, adapting to really a rapid pace of digital innovation? And I guess what are the most promising areas of growth? Anybody want to start that?
So I'll hop in a little bit there. As we look at tech, I think part of the issue is to understand as Philip said, where our strengths are. We don't necessarily need to be another Silicon Valley. There's already one and probably several others around the country. However, there are opportunities for us to set ourselves apart. So as I think about, for example, the tech industry, and here we're talking about information tech, the opportunity to capitalize on some of that advanced manufacturing that we have, the distribution that naturally goes with it, huge geographic advantage for the New Orleans and South Louisiana area. There's a lot of funding coming down from the federal government in terms of chip manufacturing as, again, we look to rewrite those supply lines. New Orleans could very well benefit not only from the bringing in of rare earth materials, but the manufacturing itself. And then look at beyond just what we think of very narrowly as the tech industry. New Orleans has already been working on the biotech, right? And so we have bio-innovation centers in New Orleans. We'll continue to look, I think, for the areas that we have some natural advantages to really develop as our own sort of tech center.
If I could touch on three economic development announcements that have happened in the last several months. One is First Solar will build the largest solar manufacturing facility in the Western Hemisphere in Southwest Louisiana. That's a huge announcement. It comes with 700 jobs, but it comes to the state because of a partnership they have with some of the local community colleges and with the University of Louisiana Lafayette. So I think that's a great example about how we can leverage technology and capabilities and skills for that. Another one is Air Products, their Blue Hydrogen Center. They're going to be manufacturing hydrogen, lower carbon hydrogen. That's a new technology. It will be the largest scale that they have. Cora is building EV battery material components right here in Louisiana. So in terms of what is it that will allow us to propel ourselves and sustain ourselves with new jobs and new opportunities for our children, I really think it's going to be around that innovation. And because if you combine the skill sets and the capabilities that the Louisiana already has, I think that energy transition is really where that opportunity is. For example, those three companies that we just mentioned that are new to Louisiana, but are coming to Louisiana because of the skill sets we have. And also want to mention wind, and that we also have an opportunity. We will have wind in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, that's not coming in the next several years. We're going to build industries that are focused on developing wind, and they're already doing it in the Northeast, and we can do it on the West Coast as well. So another part of our growth is to innovate and develop wind for offshore wind right here in Louisiana. We have the skills and capabilities that were honed in developing oil and gas exploration. It's the way that we can have a sustainable, innovative community that sort of builds on itself.
Well, I mean,
Go ahead, Eddie.
I go back to early childhood education and keeping our families here in Southwest Louisiana, or just in the state of Louisiana in general. And when we can raise our children in an environment where they love being here in Louisiana and they know that they could be successful in their own right in the job and tech world, and keep them here, then that's for generations to come, and the technology will just keep building. So I agree that it goes back to our childhood, early education.
And Walt?
Yeah, and I think this is another opportunity to just highlight the importance of our universities and the ability to take tech developed there through research and then commercialize it. I think there's been great commitment at our universities to do that. You mentioned UL Lafayette and their partnerships, certainly LSU with their partnerships with the Department of Defense on cybersecurity and other things, as well as Pennington Biomedical Research Facility that's doing remarkable things as it relates to diabetes care and other things. And I think really important, we don't need to be someone else. We need to be the best version of ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so every job's a tech job at this point. So developing, the tech that is supportive of the industries that are native to us is the key. Trying to recreate yourself as someone that you're not, I think it's a waste of your time and investment. And so we do have great opportunities, though, in the bio field. You think about the incredible healthcare facilities and universities that are doing remarkable things in the city and across the state. And I think the medical field is another one where the tech that intersects with medical is a great opportunity for our economy. We've seen other cities and other communities across the country really benefit from that focused investment on the healthcare field, on the academic field. And I think we have those tools at our disposal. It's a matter of really being focused on them.
Very good. Okay, so we are about to wrap things up. So I just want to give you all just a quick opportunity, a final thought, maybe something that we haven't touched on as we wrap up this economic outlook.
Wow, I can tell you guys, I said this before, that this is kind of like my first time being on an information panel like this. And I know this is probably not what you were looking for, Kim, but I just want to thank these gentlemen for allowing me to sit here and get a wealth of knowledge about our great state of Louisiana. So I appreciate you guys.
Steve?
Sure. I think as we look forward, you've probably detected a somewhat optimistic tone from all of us on the panel. I think that's reinforced by data. We've started to see GDP growth, for example, last year faster than the nation as a whole. And we're seeing projections from the LSU modeling of jobs growth. It's a little bit mixed around the state, but a lot of job growth concentrated in New Orleans and Baton Rouge, the large metro areas. So it does require us to be thoughtful and intentional about how we're investing those funds that we generate and how we can develop those economic drivers. But we're well positioned, and we have both natural, human, and cultural resources that will allow us to grow in the short, intermediate, and very long terms.
You know, and for me, I just want to make clear, we have an enormous opportunity in our traditional industries and in energy transition. We have things we have to do as a state to ensure that we attract and grow those. We want those jobs and those opportunities to go to our communities and our children. So let's take the steps to ensure that we get the educations, the skills, and the capabilities to grow this business right here in Louisiana.
Yeah, I think that I think one of the unfortunate things and challenges we have currently in the state is that we recognize that our state is an incredible place to visit, and we don't always give ourselves enough credit for it being an amazing place to live. And so I hope that as we continue to go forward, as our team continues to sort of work on some of these issues that we want to make it a more attractive place to visit, we're really trying to build a more attractive place to live and work for all of our team members and all of our communities at large. And so I think continuing to marry those two things together is a recipe for success, because I think with confidence and with the optimism that we've all spoke to, anything is possible for our state. We know that we're going to continue to succeed when it comes to these major events. We know that people are competing with us, but we also know we can win by working together, investing in the right way and in the right resources and infrastructure. So I, too, am optimistic about where we're headed, and we're all going to go there together.
That's a perfect way to end this. That is so good, Walden. And when I started, I said a knowledgeable panel, a wealth of knowledge, including you, Eddie, and just a lot of optimism moving forward. So I appreciate all of you guys joining me today for this 2024 Outlook Louisiana, again, hosted by NOLA.com. Today's discussion, again, brought to you by Entergy and New Orleans and Company. I'm Kim Holden. Thanks so much for joining us.